Welcome to episode 536 of the podcast. Today, we're going to look into demand generation. I know that I've already made a series of episodes about what demand generation is, but I figured let's take another go at it where I can give some concrete examples about how people apply the idea of business generation in concrete business context. Because a lot of times we hear about demand generation when we're listening to podcasts or listening to tech bros talk, and they're sounding all strategy like, and it's people with MBAs and businesses with valuations in millions of dollars and stuff like that. So it's a little hard to wrap our heads. Well, for most people anyway, they find it hard to wrap their heads around these sort of concepts that people are talking about in very highfalutin terms to see how this applies to the everyday person and people who are running regular businesses. So, just as a recap for those who have, okay, well, not as a recap, but rather for people who are catching this podcast for the first time, demand generation is a fancy term, but at the root of it, it just means creating interest or awareness around your product or your service. And the idea is very simple. If you have the right audience in mind and you're able to create curiosity in them, through the material that you put out over the internet, the content that you put out, then people are going to be able to people will be inspired to take action. For instance, to call in for price, to see if you're available for certain dates, and what are services that you offer. So if you do a good job in demand gen, creating interest and awareness, and then people calling and they take action, eventually at the bottom of the funnel, you're going to get some business. And so this is another thing in our tool belts that we can use for business development, which is essentially around growing our client base and also growing our profits. So in the next couple of episodes, we're going to look at some concrete examples of how people apply demand generation principles to growing their business. Now, a little spoiler, some of the ideas that we're going to be presented here are going to be live examples that people have tried out, especially people that were the cohort of the business incubation session that I did with Evolve Africa that I mentioned, I think, 2 weeks ago. So this is part of the recap series so that people who are part of that session will be able to remember some of the ideas that we toyed around with. And then also it's going to serve as an eye-opener for those of you who haven't considered these sorts of things. Bottom line, I'm just trying to show how some of these fancy terms aren't that fancy when you get down to the root of it and can be applied to anybody in most business contexts. So thanks for listening to episode 536 of the podcast. Remember that you guys can ask me anything by sending me a voice note or a message on Telegram or WhatsApp, and the number is 080 6466 2140. Again, the number is 080 6466 2140, and the country code for Nigeria is plus 234. Again, the country code plus 234. Thanks for listening to episode 536. I'll catch you guys at 537.